Have you ever noticed that here in America, two people can prepare for the exact same emergency, yet one is viewed as a responsible adult, while the other is labeled disparagingly as a prepper? Recently, I watched a YouTube video from the Prepper Potpourri channel titled What Other Countries Get Right About Preparedness, What We Don't. While I didn't necessarily agree with every conclusion, it challenged me to look at preparedness from an entirely different perspective. Now, it wasn't the question the video asked that stayed with me. It was the question that it inspired. Has America lost a shared social language for preparedness? That question sent me on a journey of researching how countries throughout Europe and Asia think about preparedness compared to the United States. What I discovered really did kind of surprise me. Now, the issue isn't that Americans do not prepare. Families, businesses, schools, nonprofits, and community organizations are quietly preparing every day. And I know this because I help a lot of. However, there is a difference, and I will call it a cultural difference. Many countries have successfully made preparedness a normal part of everyday life, while in America, it is often viewed through an entirely different lens. Today, I'd like to share what I learned, why I believe it matters, and how I think we can challenge and change that culture. Now, many people assume the United States simply doesn't encourage preparedness, and that absolutely is not true. In fact, organizations like FEMA and Ready.gov have produced excellent preparedness guidance for years. Emergency managers across the country work tirelessly to educate the public. Local governments conduct exercises, businesses develop continuity plans, schools practice emergency drills, and families quietly prepare their homes every day. This information already exists. The people already exist. The willingness already exists. So why does preparedness seem so disconnected? Now, I believe the answer is because we don't share a common language about preparedness. So think about this for a moment. Two families have the exact same emergency supplies. They both have food, extra water, first aid, flashlights, a family communication plan, and one family is viewed as responsible, and the other is labeled a prepper, a political construct that is usually very disparaging and demeaning. The supplies are identical, the intent is identical, only society's perception is different. And that tells me the issue isn't preparedness itself, it's our culture. So I did some research in countries like Sweden, Finland, Germany, Switzerland, Japan, and I noticed something very interesting. Preparedness is not marketed there as something unusual. It is not presented as fear. It is not associated with a political identity, and it is not considered a fringe hobby. Instead, preparedness is simply what responsible people do. Go figure. What's up with that? Places like Sweden regularly provide preparedness information to every household because citizens are viewed as part of the country's emergency management system. That makes sense. Finland teaches families to become self-sufficient during the first 72 hours following an emergency through schools, businesses, volunteer organizations, and their own community groups. Germany encourages households to maintain enough supplies to care for themselves during major disruptions. And Japan has built preparedness into everyday life because earthquakes, typhoons, tsunamis are simply a part of living there. Now, notice something all of these countries have in common. They all have normalized preparedness. They've made it part of everyday culture. Now, compare that to us here in the United States. We, for whatever reason, tend to divide preparedness into separate conversations. Emergency managers talk to emergency managers. Business continuity professionals talk to executives. Schools focus on school safety, and parents worry about their families. And our faith-based organizations help organize volunteers. Healthcare organizations prepare the hospitals. Military veterans speak about readiness, and each of those conversations is absolutely valuable. The problem is they rarely connect with one another. Everyone is speaking about preparedness. They're just using different language. Now, here's where I believe America's opportunity exists. We don't necessarily need more preparedness information. Trust me, there's plenty of it out there. You need some, ask me, I've got it for you. What we do need is more preparedness conversations. We need preparedness discussed around the dinner table. We need business talking about it during staff meetings. We need schools teaching practical life skills along with academics. And we need neighborhood organizations helping each other's neighbors. Now, if we had community leaders discussing resilience before the next disaster happens, not after it, something might be done to help mitigate the damage of that disaster when it does come, as opposed to saying, oh, woe is me, I am such a victim. In other words, preparedness must be something that becomes ordinary. Now, one thing I often talk to an audiences about and tell them that is people don't rise to the occasion. They fall to their level of preparedness. It's that simple. When an emergency is happening, the emotions are running high. We do not have time to Google it. You don't have time to get on a YouTube video and see what you need to do. You don't have time to go track down that binder you built 5 years ago that covers the situation. You need to respond to it. And the only way to respond to it is through action. Now, this is true for families, organizations, communities, businesses, schools. It does not matter what it is. If you don't know what to do, you will not do it. It's just that simple. And our culture determines this behavior long before the disaster ever will do it for us. If preparedness becomes part of our culture, responding well during an emergency becomes natural. It's simple. This idea helps reinforce one of the central messages behind my book, Why Plans Don't Prepare You. Now, plans are important. You must have a plan. You really do need one. And I've never argued otherwise. However, plans themselves don't create readiness. People do. Leadership does. Communication plans help prepare people. Training does. Habits do. Culture does. When pressure arrives, people don't follow binders, they follow leaders. Imagine what America would look like if preparedness became as ordinary as changing the batteries in a smoke detector. Imagine if discussing emergency contacts became as routine as discussing retirement planning. Imagine if businesses viewed continuity planning the same way they view cybersecurity. Yeah, but some don't. Imagine if schools taught students how to communicate during emergencies just as naturally as they teach mathematics. Imagine if preparedness became something we simply expected of ourselves, not because someone required it, but because leadership demands it. That is the kind of culture I hope we can build. So I'd like to leave you with a question. What if the greatest preparedness challenge facing America is not our emergency plans? What if it isn't funding? What if it isn't emergency management? What if the greatest challenges are simply that we've never developed a shared social language for preparedness? Now, I think that's a conversation worth having. In fact, I believe it's one of the most important conversations we can have if we truly want to become a more resilient nation. If this conversation has given you anything to think about, continue with the article below. In the article, you'll find research, references from government preparedness agencies around the world, and practical ideas for helping families, businesses, schools, nonprofits, and communities grow stronger through a culture of readiness. I would genuinely like to hear your thoughts. Do you think preparedness has become misunderstood in America? Has it become something we only talk about after the disaster happens instead of before it? Leave a comment below and join the conversation. If you found the article valuable, please like it, share it with somebody who cares about leadership and preparedness. And remember, preparedness is not about fear, it's not about politics, and it certainly is not about labels. Preparedness is leadership. Till next time, please stay informed and stay safe.